Hi everyone, it's Koby Stevens here. I just want to jump in quickly and say a massive thank you for joining us. For almost a decade, I was fortunate enough to play Australian rules football. Before in 2018, I had to retire after a string of concussions.
Koby Stevens has revealed his regret at keeping concussion symptoms a secret.
The Remade is a series born from that journey. Over the last 5 years, I've travelled the world searching for healing and meeting some of the most inspiring, resilient, and courageous people I've ever known. People who have not only challenged the way that I see the world, but people whose stories deserve to be told. And just quickly before we get into this episode, I need to say a massive thank you to our major sponsor, Licci, a visionary non-profit building the first ever community designed for adults living with TBI. Their mission? To offer more than a place to live, but a place to grow and belong. If this message resonates with you, visit villalicci.org to support the movement.
I was on my couch for weeks.
Yeah.
I had no hope, no purpose. I'm starting my life over at age 30. Every day I go the same routine, point fingers, cast blame, make excuses, become angry, and nothing changes. Go figure. And I remember the words "find a way" pop into my head, and they just ignite a journey. They sparked so many things, but the one thing it sparked still to this day, take action. Like, do something about your circumstance. That's what helped me get off the couch. And my daughter was 9 at the time, and she crawled up my lap, and she was like, got a little dainty arms around my neck, and then she says, finally I just stopped and looked at her, and she says, well, then, you know what, Dad, you got to find a way. And that day, I never looked back.
We good? Oh, Merril, how are you, brother?
I'm good, bud. How about you?
Yeah, good, man. Whereabouts are you at the moment?
Cincinnati, Kentucky area. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. We're just across the river in Cincinnati, in Kentucky, but just across from Cincinnati.
Yeah, amazing. I've been doing a bit of research on you the last couple of weeks, and it's crazy, man. Your story resonates with me so much.
Well, I appreciate that.
I actually grew up in a small country town 4 hours east of Melbourne too, so I'd love to talk about like you growing up in Idaho and the journey to actually becoming an NFL player, growing up in such a small town, man.
Yeah, where did you grow up at?
I grew up in a town called Bensdale, which is about 4 hours east of Melbourne, where I ended up playing most of my football. Yeah, so our family actually, we're farmers down there, dairy farmers.
Oh, okay. I worked on a dairy farm for several years, man. Milk cows. That's a man's job, man. People who do that,
Yeah.
man, tough as nails.
Yeah, man, they are tough as nails. My grandpa's still on the farm down there. He's just raising cattle now.
Okay. What kind of cattle?
Just heifers, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think he was a dairy farmer for about 30 years, but I think, like you said, I got to him by the end, I think.
I don't blame you.
So you went to college in Idaho as well?
Yeah. I didn't know that they had school outside my hometown, to be honest with you. I thought I went from kindergarten through college in my hometown. So I didn't know that they had school outside that place at that time.
What did it take to get to that college level, man? I guess for me, it was I didn't think that I'd be able to probably go play at the elite level growing up in a town like that.
Do they do the same thing in that process? You get scholarships to go to colleges and play, or?
No, we don't have a scholarship. We don't have a college system for football. They do have high school football, but it's more. There's a league below the Australian Football League. It's called like the under-18s comp, and it's pretty much nationwide now. And I got drafted from there. Yeah.
Well, it would be like, so college. I didn't know what I was doing either. I had a coach that understood the system. He actually played in college, and he played at Idaho State, which was the college in my hometown. And his dad was actually the offensive coordinator at the university that he played at. And he was my high school coach. And so he helped me. I'll probably actually, he's probably solely responsible for me probably getting a scholarship, because they had wanted to offer a bunch of other players, and he talked his dad into at least offering me.
Yeah. Did you have any other offers anywhere else, or
Oh,
no? That
well,
was
I didn't go any. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't take a trip. I didn't go any. I knew nothing about the college, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. My parents didn't know. Although my dad went on a scholarship to Idaho State. He played football and wrestled there, but he wasn't much help.
You probably
in the
wouldn't have wanted
process.
to leave anyway, huh? Leave the home state.
What's that?
You probably wouldn't have wanted to leave the home state anyway.
You know what? Actually, the only thing I cared about is wanted to go play. I didn't like. I wasn't interested in university, any college in particular. I was just like, wherever I'll go, I just want to play. And one of my goals was to start as a freshman if I went and played. And it didn't matter where that was to me. I did not care.
Yeah. And then what? So then drafted to Pittsburgh after that.
Yeah.
How long were you at
Pittsburgh
Pittsburgh
Steelers.
for?
In 1987, I got drafted by the Steelers, and they're my favorite team as a kid. So
Really?
So to get drafted by them was surreal in many ways. I'd only been on one other plane other than the plane that they sent for me to go to Pittsburgh when I got drafted, and I'd never been that far back east ever. I didn't even know what to expect, and that was a culture shock.
I can imagine.
I went from mountains and desert and the wildlife and to a big city, and that was slightly overwhelming at the time.
Yeah. And then what? So Pittsburgh, then to Chicago, was it?
Yeah. Then my free agency came around about my 5th year, and then in my 8th year, I became a free agent, and I ended up playing for my other favorite team, the Chicago Bears. My favorite player is Walter Payton, and so I got to go to Chicago, and it just didn't last as long as I had anticipated because I loved that city. I loved playing for the Bears, and it just didn't only last a year.
Yeah. What happened there, man? I've read a little bit about it.
Well, what's often misunderstood is that people say a concussion ended my career, and that's actually incorrect because if that was the case, the Monday night game when I had the concussion, I wouldn't have played again, and I was back playing a little over a week later. But what happened to me, just improper care of the actual injury. Because the head trauma that I got on the Monday night game in Kansas City was severe. And I try to explain, when I say severe, what does that mean? And people misunderstand head trauma and severity of head trauma. So they will take, for example, if somebody loses consciousness, that's a severe head trauma. And not necessarily. It's a sign of head trauma, but it's not a sign of severity. Because once you regain consciousness, it's no longer a sign or a symptom because you've regained consciousness. So there's only 2 things that can give you a sign of severity, and that is cognitive recall and stability. And so that's why those things are measured to give you the sense of how severe it was. And you don't even have to lose consciousness to have really severe cognitive recall and severe immobility. That's how you diagnose, how severe it is. And I had a severe one. I mean, I couldn't remember where I was, what they had talked to me a half hour before we even got on the plane. So that's like almost 2 hours later after it had originally happened. We fly home, and I still can't recall stuff. I'm still not very stable. And, 4 or 5 hours after head trauma, that's considered severe. A lot of people, recover immediately. They start recalling things. They may have missed a certain spot when, during the trauma, but when things were asked of them, going forward, they remember things. Yeah, I remember you talking to me here. Like, I wouldn't remember any of that. But anyway, they cleared me to go back and play 5 days later over the phone. Like, they didn't even come see me. And that's like archaic. Even in 1994, that was an archaic way to look at a player or a patient, period, for any type of head trauma. And I only answered one question. The question was, how you feel? And I had a raging headache, but I mean, you always have to go perspective. What did we know back then? Because people will use the information you have today and go, well, why didn't you say you had a headache and stuff? No player was ever told at that time, here's some symptoms that you need to watch for. Here are some things that you need to be alert and aware of. And if you have them, share them. Well, none of that was said. And clearly in 1994, to see a patient, to see some player or somebody who has had some type of trauma like that is like, that's like, how do I put this? Like math 101. I mean, you see somebody after they've had something severely happen to them, especially in the brain area, and they just failed to do that. And unfortunately, I returned to play. I suffered a similar type of trauma. I went into cardiac arrest. Obviously, my career was over. I laid in intensive care for several days, and the recovery process, going to what they're doing here with the facility, what I resonate with it is that I was on my couch for weeks. I had no hope, no purpose. I'm starting my life over at age 30. Every day I go the same routine, point fingers, cast blame, make excuses, become angry, and nothing changes. Go figure. But it wasn't really until I took some ownership of where I was. I quit blaming doctors, quit blaming the Bears, quit being angry at the league. Even though they had drastically made mistakes, that wasn't getting me off the couch. That's not helping you move forward in life. Was not helping me. And when I go back to this overall facility and what they're trying to do with it, man, you could surely help some people through some arduous times in some dark spaces that not everybody gets out of. And the more you stay in that darkness, the harder it is to get out of there. But there's just so much hope for the proper treatment, proper care, and the tools that do exist that can help people. And that is always, I think, forgotten or not shared enough, because there's more opportunities and more great things from a recovery aspect and a rehab aspect that exists today than ever before. And, aside from tissue damage or, skull structure, the bone being skull damage, I mean, oftentimes a lot of head trauma can be recovered and repaired for. The brain is fascinated from that perspective of its ability to repair and relearn and retrain itself and rehab itself. Hopefully we can help a lot of people that are in those moments, because like even my rehab took almost 2 years before it cleared up.
Yeah, you had to learn to like read and talk again and everything, right?
Well, I had to learn how to read again. That's where it actually all started. That was my biggest challenge, is reading. I couldn't leave the house. I had to have people with me when I left, especially in Chicago. Now, it was interesting. I couldn't leave my home in Chicago or I'd get lost. I mean, I would have no idea where I was at. But I went back to Pittsburgh, to my place in Pittsburgh, and I had, because I'd been there for almost 10 years, I had memories of where I was there. I knew things there. I was a little more familiar there than I was in Chicago. I struggled more in Chicago than I did Pittsburgh.
Yeah. How hard was it for you to get out of, I guess, that like victim and blame mindset? Because I remember when I went through it, I was in a very similar mindset. Had a chip off my shoulder. I was like, fuck the league. Didn't want to watch football, and it took a long time to put that ego aside. Being a elite athlete for probably two years until I started to do that. Was that hard for you?
But it's probably one of the darker moments I've ever had. I referred to it that I laid on the couch. Because when I speak, I actually talk about this moment. And everybody, listen, probably has been in this moment, not as dark as the moment I'm talking about, but something happened to you. You either did it to yourself or somebody did it to you. And often it's, when somebody else does it to you, that this I think plays a bigger role. They took advantage of you. They did something wrong to you. And in my case, obviously it was career ending, but it was life changing, and it almost took my life, just the incompetency of the doctor to treat me in the way he had treated actually many other patients who were less severe as I was, for the NFL to come in and support how he handled me, that is the proper protocol and care for a player. There was, I won the court case on it. So I have all the evidence and have the truth of the evidence of how wrong things were done to me. Now, that being said, when you harbor ill will like that, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I finally realized laying on that couch, it was months into it. I'm like, nobody's coming to get me off this couch. I have a responsibility to get myself off the couch. I need to stop pointing, what the doctor did. Yes, unacceptable. I mean, as atrocious as you could think, but that ain't changing. And if I'm going to let that be if I'm going to let that be a cornerstone of my life, that's where I'm going to stay. And I chose on that day not to stay there. And I was done staying there. And I got off the couch. I made a return call to actually Lynn Swan that had left me several messages. And he was trying to help me move over into my life's work with broadcasting. And I felt so sorry for myself. This is how depressed and ugly, dark it gets. You're like, well, I'm not going to return his call. He's literally got to come to this house and beg me to do it. I'm like, the irrationality that you come up with and the stupidity, it's just, it just gets darker and darker and uglier and uglier. And I just like, enough. You're responsible for this. You're the one that's dug this hole deeper for you. And if you're going to let all that stuff keep doing that to you, then you're going nowhere. And once I got off the couch, and I'm not saying everything. I mean, yes, everything did change, but it wasn't just, okay, now it's over. I mean, it was a 5-year journey before I really had recovered. I'd really, worked my way through so many things that had affected me and I had to deal with at that time. But had I not made that first step, then I wouldn't have ever got there. And that's what I try to share with people is we all have a responsibility. We got to take ownership of our journey. We are the CEO of our life, and we are responsible for going forward. When somebody does something wrong, can't control that, but you can surely control how you deal with it, how you handle it, how you harbor it, how you let it go, how you move on from it. And that taught me to be better at that, and I'm much better at that than I was then. And I had it not been for that, I probably wouldn't be where I am today based on all the experiences, in that dark moment, helped me with other dark moments in my life and made them much easier.
Was that the hardest thing during that 5-year journey, like physically and emotionally, just taking that first step, or was there other things that were coupled on that?
It was one of the hardest because it's a good question because, is it the hardest? Does it get easier? In a way, it got, okay, yes, the first one was to finally stop letting all of that trash weigh me down. Okay, to let that go after I'd done it for months and months and, nearly, 6-7 months to let it go. But then there started to become some peace and freedom to it. Like it wasn't weighing me down. Like I could program myself into some other things, think about other things that are good at positive energy things that were helping me go to where my next chapter was going to be. But one of the harder things, I think, the next hard thing was because I was still struggling cognitively, I transitioned into television. And now you talk about some cognitive skills if you got to have television. Television, I tell people this, it's like having a pine tree of information and you got to whittle it down to the stump and present that. Well, that's even hard for a well-trained cognitive human. For somebody that was as scrambled as me, actually, sometimes I could only remember a stump, and then that became hard. And then I would lose that when I would start talking. So to remember things, and here's one of the problems that I had, so people understand what I mean by that, is I had the trauma that I dealt with. It was hard for me to hold information. You don't realize, how powerful our brain is, how extraordinary the brain is, and all the things it's really doing. Like in this conversation, geez, the lights you're dealing with, you're listening to me, you're thinking of other things. You might even be wandering into like tomorrow what you should be doing. Okay, right? You have a lot of things around you.
Dude, I couldn't have done that 5 years ago after my injury.
Yeah, you would be someone that could identify with it. I was so bad that one of my first shows I ever did, they started talking and I just lost everything. And I was trying to listen to what they were saying and I forgot everything. And I had no ability to recover from it. And thank goodness we taped that show. And I got some luck in the shows that we did early on. We taped before I went into some live stuff, which helped me. But how I survived is all I would do is I would shut everything off and just think about what I had to say. And that's just how I would do it. So I couldn't carry on a conversation. I couldn't listen to you have some dialogue. You could take me down another road, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. If you did that, I'd be like completely, just absolutely done. And
That must
took
have been pretty
several
scary,
years.
man. Being in front of, like, you were ESPN after that, right?
Yeah. And so like I'd step all night and I'd practice in the mirror, and I would just practice what I had to say. That's all I could really hold on to I would not listen to what anybody else said. I only talked when they addressed me, and I didn't even listen to that. I just knew what I was going to say, and I said it.
Yeah. I'd love to, man, move forward and talk about those 3 words on your hat. Can you take us back to the day they were said and what, obviously you went through everything and then transitioned to the ESPN and then another setback during that period as well.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the day that the words really resonated with me, I was 12 years old. I had just had my dad make me a wall of cork. And I wanted a wall of cork to put goals up. I remember a teacher one day in class said, everybody needs to have goals and dreams, and you need to write them down and pin them up in your room because it's where you start and end your day. You need to see them in the morning when you get up, and you need to revisit them at night. And I remember thinking, that's the greatest idea I ever heard. So I had my dad make me a wall of cork, makes me a wall of cork, and I pinned the goal up, I will play in the National Football League, because that was my goal. I was 12 years old, put Walter Payton up, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I had this first moment of truth in life. When I was asked as a kid, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'd say, I'm going to play in the NFL. As soon as I said that, one of 4 things was said to me. Oh, my gosh, you know how hard that is? Do you know the odds you playing in the NFL are? Oh, son, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. We wouldn't want you to be disappointed, or it's impossible. And I was revisiting those things. I was looking at, I would play in the National Football League, and the more I let those things weigh on me, like the heavier they became. And for a moment, like I'll play in the National Football League was nothing more than words on a wall. And here's where I had my first moment of truth in life, a moment of like self-reflection. I remember thinking, I get angry. I was like, I didn't write that to be words on a wall. I wrote it down because I wanted to achieve it. And on that day, I committed to that goal. Whatever work was required, I was going to do it. Whatever odds I was up against, even though I didn't know it, I was going to put them on I was going to attempt to beat them. But don't put your eggs in one basket. Still, even when I was a kid, I was like, that's dumb. That's just dumb. And what I thought of at that point, I don't want to wake up 20 years later and regret I didn't try. I don't want to be disappointed in myself. And that was probably the tipping point where like a fire lit in me, my energy changed. And then I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And I remember the words find a way pop into my head, and they just ignite a journey. They sparked so many things, but the one thing it sparked still to this day, because I have them sitting right there, take action. Like do something about your circumstance. That's what helped me get off the couch. Even though I was there for months, it was like you find a way and you make things happen. Do I know how I'm going to do that at the time? No, I did not know how I was going to do that. And really what it taught me is that we are all responsible for our journeys. We are the CEO of ourselves and where we're going and how we're going to do things. And the quicker you can learn to take ownership of your journey, the quicker that you can focus and learn that you have to invest in you to get the best out of you, then you're going to be richly rewarded for doing that. And I'm not getting an award like a trophy, not those type. You're going to be rewarded with things like peace, joy, happiness, and personal success and joy because you did your part. You got everything out of your God-given ability. You have no regrets. Fear is temporary, regret is forever. Man, you start living by what you trust, and the person you trust is the person in the mirror. That you don't want to let down. And that's kind of it in a nutshell at age 12, and they still sit on my wall today. And they spark me to do that one thing, take action. Circumstances come up all the time. People have them all the time, and they're good. I mean, there could be a goal driven, or it could be a darkness that comes your way. You didn't see it. I know what everybody's smart enough to know what the results will be if you do nothing. So do something.
Did they, and you were diagnosed with cancer, right, as well, non-Hodgkin's.
And that right there was the darkest because of the finality of it. you know, and I was on the couch and my career was over. There was just a sorrow of darkness, of loss, you know, and I'd lost my mom when I was a kid too. So, you know, loss is loss. And the sting of death is one thing, but you know, the loss of like hope and purpose, I mean, that's empty. And even those were dark. When I was told I had a 3-pound tumor in my lower back, and he said it's the size and shape of a football, and I was going to go through brutal chemotherapy, it could take 2 years. And he said, and I can't even guarantee what we're going to do is going to work for you. Well, the reality of like, it's over. I mean, like death being a part of that battle was overwhelming. It was as dark as I've ever been. And it was really, after I shared it with my kids that I was going to be bald and I was going to be sick and tired because I wanted to get ahead of it because they're not used to me being sick and bald laying on a couch. And my daughter was 9 at the time, and she's the one that crawled up in my lap and finally got my attention. And I looked at her and she said, "Well, then you know what, Dad? You better find a way." Because I've used find a way as a parenting tool for them. Like they come in my office, I'm like, "Okay, well, Corey, let's find a way. What do you think you have to do? What should you do? What's your plan?" You know, I try to get them engaged in the process because when you take ownership of your journey, you create a plan. You have a better chance to stick to it than to hear somebody tell you, "You need to do A, B, and C." But I'd help. Don't give me. But she was used to me saying that, and you know, she challenged me on that day. It was very similar to age 12. Like I got a new sense of energy. I mean, dying wasn't an option. Being sick and tired, feeling sorry for myself, not an option. Going bald, that's still going to be an option. But man, the way I thought about it changed. My energy changed. And very similar to age 12, you know, from how I went about accomplishing that goal, I overcame like the greatest challenge that I've ever had to deal with.
Do you think cancer was your biggest challenge? I
Yes.
my
Yes,
grandpa, I watched my grandpa die of bowel cancer, and he was one of the hardest people I'd ever met in my life. Like this giant of a person, and watching him like go through that experience, I could see like that emotional experience was like a 5-year journey, you know, and I could only imagine like the fear and how hard that would be for a man like yourself.
Well, you know, Kobe, you can understand the compounds of fear. Okay, for your kids to see you erode like that, like you've never forgot that. You know, and that erosion was all I could think of was chemotherapy and dying. I'm telling you, it's all just initially. That's the only thing I could think of, and just for the visual of that, um, just I almost, and I lost my mom when I was a kid. So I understand the sting of death and how that losing a parent can wreck a home and change lives. There was a bunch of things weighing on me, you know, with 2 kids that are different when you don't have kids. But the sting of death is the sting of death. And that being part of the equation, there's no way that one person, you know, because I did it. I remember I just read a book about a guy who had fought cancer, beat it. And I remember I closed the book up. I'm like, man, I'm not big enough for that one. That ain't.
Right.
But I'm like, I'll never have to worry about that. With the way my family history is, we have no history in our cancer history. I'll never have the way my lifestyle. Never worry about. Because I was like, I just anointed my. I ain't big enough to handle that. I could never handle it, but I'll never have to worry about that. Then when you get presented that, I handled it just like I thought I would. I couldn't handle it. I was like, it wasn't until my daughter challenged me that changed how I approached that.
And I guess it wasn't just those 3 words, though. What was it about your daughter challenging you?
Well, in the way she did it, you know, because he crawled up my lap and she was like, got a little dainty arms around my neck. And then she says, you know, finally I just stopped and looked at her and she says, "Well, then, you know what, Dad, you got to find a way." And so it wasn't, she challenged me. The other ones gave me hope. This time it challenged me. And man, it changed the way I thought. And she was right. Like the way I was thinking, I was only helping myself to the grave. I wasn't going to get myself out of there. And that day, I never looked back.
How important is it though, like changing the way that we think to be able to like get through that? You know, one of my biggest things is, Dude, if you can't get to that mindset of changing the way that we think, it's so hard to pull yourself out of that.
Well, you nailed it. That's why it comes back to us. You know, you're the first choice, and you are so responsible to yourself. I was responsible for getting myself up off that couch. Does that mean I didn't have people help me after that? Absolutely not, man. When people are here to help, you know, this is what this facility is about, to helping people. But there's going to be a step in the journey where it starts with you. But if you take that step, man, then we'll help you to the second one, and then the third one, and then we'll be together, you know, the fifth and sixth one. But it does start there.
I want to talk about, just to finish up, Villa Licci and what they're actually doing and why it's so important for this community. It's obviously they've supported us for this podcast, but why is that so important? And you're the spokesperson for them.
Well, you know, I go back to my experience. You know, those months laying on a couch. Nobody, you know, just during the football season. And listen, that I went from starting on Sundays on television at 1 o'clock to watching somebody in my position and getting into a darker and a darker and a darker space. I had no purpose and I had no hope. So I don't care how together someone is, man, you lose hope and purpose. That's not an easy thing to overcome. And especially if you have some type of lingering, you know, cognitive effect like I had, where, you know, I say this now, and it's kind of funny. I haven't found it funny at the time, but I'm like, this tells you kind of how bad I am. You're way probably too young to know this, but there was a kid show that all the kids liked when my daughter was around 3. It's called Barney, and he's a big purple dinosaur. Okay, and from the age of our years, Barney's just like, yeah, what the? I mean, you can't. I couldn't handle him for a minute. Kids loved him for hours. Well, I'm sitting there watching Barney with my daughter, and I liked it, and I understood it. That's funny. You know, because there's a fine line between tragedy and comedy, and I was sitting on it. You know, and I was like, and that was my life, and I was like, it went from 1 o'clock on Sunday to Barney, and I'm like, I found enough strength within myself to get off the couch. And we need everybody to do that. But boy, it's nice to have somebody that can help you once you get off the couch and help you in ways where you have more skills and tools now to help people. And not just in a short term, but it can be in a long term, but ways that you can really recover and you can embrace and enjoy life. And to see that they are doing that for people and have that opportunity. I get excited for people because I didn't have that. I didn't have any of those tools. I didn't even have the cognitive tools that exist today to help you repair and recover for yourself. I actually had to use them with how I had to train my brain to learn to work on television versus how I had to work my brain when I played football. And those challenges helped me to grow and recover and repair. And so there's all these access for tools to recover and repair, you know, the help for hope, you know, and reestablishing purpose in a person's life without them doing it all by themselves. Yes, there's responsibility you have initially, but now you can have somebody in a group that can help you along the way that's skilled and trained in that arena.
Amazing, man. I think that's all I've got, but no, well, thank you, man. I'm greatly appreciative for the chat.
Absolutely, brother.
The Remade series is brought to you by our partner, Villa Licci, a non-for-profit building the first ever community for people living with traumatic brain injuries to live on their own with dignity and support. If you believe in second chances and a safe space for TBI sufferers, visit villalicci.org to make a donation and learn more. Hi, and before you take off, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube page.